Hello and welcome back, this is ProTailDev. This time we're looking at the Yogscast Game Jam 2020 that I took part in last week, and we're going to be going over the first day. This was a 48-hour game jam, and it was hosted by the Yogscast, which I took part in the last year's game jam, 2019. I had a lot of fun, so I figured I'd try this one. I'll be going through pretty much everything I did on the first day, and then we'll have the second day in another video. And then finally one more video just for kind of review, just like I did last year. The theme for the game jam was surprise. Basically what I wanted for this was for the game to be a hide and seek style game where a player would be able to hide in a present and another player would be able to go and find them, and then surprise there's the player. Basically that's the whole concept of the thing related to the theme. Without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so to start off with, we're going to create a new game, a new project, and I'm going to be using the high definition render pipeline just because I want a little bit of extra lighting for this game jam, kind of just to add to the game. So here we go, just setting up a quick scene, nothing too fancy, just the basics, and once that's all set up, what I then do is I move on to making sure that certain aspects are in the game. So one of the things I wanted was this to be a low poly style game because it'll be easier to find assets for. So I bring in polybrush so I can edit the specific materials. I think that'll be good. Okay, so after I brought in polybrush, which will allow me to edit materials in low poly, I then go into Blender and I make some terrain. So very basic terrain, things I've done in other videos, just to create some kind of an area for us to work with. And I just make sure that I'm using different brushes and different things to kind of layer it out a little bit and make it a little bit unique. Again, it's going to be low poly anyway, so we're going to be changing that later. So here I am just moving it around and then kind of editing the terrain a little bit. All the edges are going to be spiked up a little bit just to make it so that player knows where to not go, and it will be easier for me to kind of colour this later with the polybrush. Once that's done, I then use the sculpting tool to kind of smooth out a little bit in places and kind of make it all fit together. Make sure it's all in triangles because it looks better in low poly games. And then once that's done, I'll get ready to export it out. So final touches, make sure everything's okay, and then I'll bring it out to export it after some minor little changes in the terrain here and there. Get it, make sure I've named it and sorted it out, and then export. Okay, so back into Unity, I have a get_empty_game_object, make sure that I add the terrain in which we've imported into Unity. I've got the brush here, and I'm just here fixing the material because it breaks the material when you come in when you want to use polybrush. So create a new material using the specific shader. Make sure that your script's on the correct the game object for the terrain so that I can draw on it on this new material, and here I am just testing it. Once that's done, I add a collider to the world so that I can actually land on it when I'm a player. Create a new game object for ice, which is going to go in our little lake area that we created in Blender, and then kind of position it where I want it. And then use the polybrush again to colour it. I'm probably going to use polybrush more in the future because it seems quite fun to use and quite easy to kind of colour in low poly textures and materials. So I probably might use this a little bit more in my videos later. So here I am just colouring it in to make sure it looks nice. And obviously it's going to be in ice terrain, so it's going to be snowy. Okay, and like I said, it's going to be all snowy and nice, so here I am just adding a little bit of colour into the lake as well, the ice lake, adding a little bit to it. And then once that's done, I just add a little bit of more kind of snowy areas to it, just to kind of make it blend. I really think this is quite nice. Another thing I do is add some extra packs, and link in the description to the people that I got these free assets from. Shout out to them because I didn't have time for this game jam to make some assets in Blender apart from the terrain. Here I am just fixing the materials because obviously they break when you bring them into the high definition render pipeline. You've got to re-update them and re-import them. So here I am just fixing it all. Yeah, links in the description for the people I've used them from. I also added in Pro Builder because I wanted to try and use it a little bit more. I've only used it a little bit. I'm talking maybe just for testing, and so I want to try and use it to build kind of some really basic low polygon shapes and to make houses with it, but I found that it ended up taking me too long to kind of work out the controls. For the most part I did kind of get it, but it's not Blender and it's not Maya, so it's a little bit more trickier to use when I'm just trying to do a game jam, and so it wasn't the quick solution I wanted. So I ended up kind of leaving the Pro Builder for another time. But here I'm just using it to create a basic block. I was going to make a house from it, but decided not to and just stick with the basic shapes that I could kind of import with cylinders and cubes and things, just to kind of build it up a little bit more. And eventually I just built a basic house. I brought in the prefabs from the other pack that we already installed, the free assets, and then kind of built a house around it after disabling those objects, just to kind of build something with the basic shapes. In the end, it didn't really work out. It just looked too plain, and it ended up looking out of place with the low poly terrain. So I kind of go with something else in a minute, another free pack, which again will be in the description. Here I am with all the different objects, kind of just making it all blend in. Once I've got everything imported, all the different prefabs to kind of build a little bit of a house, I decided to add almost like a porch area so the player can go up, but I decided to change the whole aspect of this house being in the actual terrain, and I will eventually move it back outside and make it so that you can teleport into it instead, so it's a completely different area of the map. So here I am, empty game object, just kind of sorting things around, adding some lights in, and to make sure the house looks quite nice, making sure it's all packed up, and then quick test, looks quite nice. Noticed a few issues with the lighting here because it's really strong. So yeah, the lighting's really too strong here, so I end up playing around with the lighting. The exposure's a bit too high, so I play around with the exposure, and that looks a lot nicer. A lot of extra settings that I end up playing with, but I won't show that. And then what I do is I lock off the door of the building, and then move it out of the main area for the game. Again, bring in some house exterior. Again, link will be in the description for these free assets that I've used, so if you want to use them you can. And this just allows me to put in some houses that I kind of needed. Again, fixing the materials that I need to. Obviously they've broken when I brought them in, and this is obviously a quick fix. It's not too bad. Once I've done that, I make sure the scaling's correct to what I want it, and this requires a little bit of playing around and bringing the objects in. Another thing I do is I copy the same terrain and then bring it over to the side, because I thought I might want a bigger area, and then bring in the house, make sure the scaling's correct, which again, playing around with it, making sure it's what I want, and then make sure I've rotated certain things in so they make sure that they layer with the snow on the terrain, the actual terrain itself, and then bring these in one at a time until I've got them in the positions I want. Next to the lake, I wanted a couple of houses that are slanted down. Hope was that a player would jump on them and be able to jump from house to house. Then back to polybrush, make some paths going around certain areas, just to make the terrain a little bit nicer to look at as well. After the path was done, polybrush allows you to also bring in prefabs and then be able to dot them around different sizes and different densities and such. So I do that, same as the default terrain tool that's in Unity. Very much the same things. So I bring all that in, and you can also manually change these prefabs in the actual level themselves, so make sure that they're flush to the ground and stuff like that. So I did that. Quick save. Okay, next thing I do is I then create our players. I get some basic controls in there and get some basic rig bodies and cameras, because we're going to have two different cameras, because this is actually going to be a split screen game, which I don't think I've mentioned yet. I want to go split screen because I think it'll be interesting. So get the cameras set up, which I have done, so that it shows as a split screen. And then after I've got the split screen done, I then make a couple of scripts, which I've skipped ahead here, but I create a couple of empty scripts. I already have this written down before the game jam, what scripts I kind of want. But basically I create a player movement, which I've skipped ahead again and created it. Very basic. I also want to destroy object for later, so if the player runs into it, it'll destroy them. Again, we'll have player tags set up in the meantime, and then once that's done, I then go back to a second player movement. At the moment, just set up with the same controls, and then an options menu. If I get time, I add this script in. If I get time to manage to set up the UI later. Okay, next thing I do is I've got a main menu in script which I created as well. The main menu is always necessary for games like this especially. So I bring that in, got a bunch of different scripts now all set up. And some of them I won't end up using, like I said. Some of them won't be used at all, but that's okay. Random size and rotation. And make sure that I've set up the character correctly with our player movement. And this means getting rid of the rigid body and things like that, because we'll be controlling the movement directly. Minor changes to the positioning of houses so that they're not floating, and again minor changes to the player. Add in some the player tag for player 1 so that we can directly use it in our script, specific object for player. And then what I also do is I make sure to change the individual cameras and thing. I also deleted the player 2 while I'm trying to sort the player 1 out. I'll add the 2 back. I also created a basic mouse look script which allows me to be able to move the mouse around vertical and horizontal so I can see. I also I add the gingerbread prefab and use that as the player's model, simply because I don't have a model and I don't have time to get one. So I'll use that for both the prop and the hunter for this hunting hide and seek game, split screen. I also do some minor changes here and there for jumping and gravity and speed and things like that. So the other thing I want to do is once that the settings are done for the player 1, I also bring the player 2 back, bring its camera back, and then at the moment I'm still controlling it with the same controls, which is why it's moving the same. And they both have the mouse script on, which I decide to change because I don't want the mouse script to control both. I also add in a gradient and add in some colour to the sky, because at the moment it was just black and grey, and so yeah, I just add a little bit of a sky aspect to it. Don't have a skybox, don't have time to get one unfortunately, but yeah, I just add in a basic colour to it. Okay, so next I add some controls. Again, input manager. We want individual controls for the specific player we're using. So I set this up for player 1 and player 2 to have different controls. There was a lot of different changes with what controls worked with what, but for the most part it was WASD for player 1, player 2 was arrows, mouse was used to look for the hunter, and for the normal default player I would create a simple script which allowed you to use Q and E to move their screen. Basically a player would be able to work on either side. So again, minor changes to the scripts. I move the hunter into the house, and then test out the little movements of both to make sure they're okay. So there you go, I'm moving around on using the player movement 2 script, and then again, like I mentioned before, a simple look script for our player who's hiding. Okay, and next thing, once I've added the simple look into it and make sure that the settings are correct, set up the script obviously to make sure it's working, which is just Q and E to turn around, as you can see in this video. It's just me doing that, and I didn't want the player to look up or down specifically because I wanted that to be the disadvantage of hiding. Next thing I do is a portal, so I want to teleport basically from one position to another when you go in the house and out. This gives the illusion that you're actually going into the house, and so what I'm doing here is it's just a simple collision box. When a tag is triggered through the collision of a player, it'll immediately send them to the exit point, and the exit point will actually be just another object, empty game object. So very simple code here. It's just the door teleport script, very, very basic, just skipping ahead again, and when you hit like I said, the tag, the object with a tag, it'll just teleport you to that, it'll rewrite your position to the exit position of the game object I've got written down. So after that, a quick test, and it was working. So there you go, I can go in and out the house. Cool, so after some minor changes and playing around with the teleport, I ended up running out of time to do more, but that was the hope of having more houses to teleport to, but I ran out of time. Okay, so the last part of this video is I create a game object, a game manager, which is going to hold all the different scripts that are not directly controlling a specific object, and basically about functionality of the actual how things work. And this is the really important script. This is the round timer script, which will control our actual game mode, our game in general, and how when our players actually seek and not. So the way it works is that there'll be a true and a false for hiding, seeking, and in a minute hunting. And what this means is that whether it's true or false depends on what kind of part of the game mode we're in. Again, there's 3 different parts: seeking, hiding, and not in that order, so it's hiding, seeking, and chase. The way it works is it's just a simple code here that basically determines a timer, and when the timer runs out it moves on to another game mode depending on if you successfully hidden or seeked. And what I'm doing here is just setting up the timer. So you already just saw the script for the actual timer. I'm just making it into real time as well, so I've already done that. It should be displaying. I've come into the canvas and then put the text there so that you can actually see the timer. So if you want to slow that down you can, and you can have a look at the script. But basically I add in an image, just it's going to be blocking one side of the screen. This is how the game's going to work. Basically on screen, one part of the screen will be blocked off and it will tell the player to close their eyes or look away. While they're doing that, another player on the other side of the screen will be hiding. When the timer runs out for hiding, then it will switch places. The black screen will be on the other side, so you can't see where the hider is hidden, and the seeker will have to go and find them. So that's what I'm setting up here. The blind image, which blocks off the sight of a specific side, will be just being set active or not, depending on where we are in the timer on each set. This could probably be done even better, but this is what I ended up with. It's a very simple script. If it ends up the timer goes to 0, then it will determine if a player for example, if a player is not hidden in time, then they'll fail. If they have hidden and they're at 0, then you'll move on to the seek stage if you're seeking. But you don't manage to find the player while the timer runs out, then you've failed that, and it's the same thing with the chase stage. So I've just added in a bit of text for press T to taunt, which will add some sound effects later. But basically, this is the footage that you're seeing. Basically, you hide. Once you've hidden, you need to go and find the player. Once the timer runs out, if you find the player, which I did there, I just clicked on the bool, which allows me to turn it on. That we're in the hunting stage because you found them, which will activate later in the next day. So that is what we've got so far. Very basic game. Hopefully I didn't go too quick. If I did, you'll have to slow it down a little bit. Again, I wanted to try and get this in with as little time as possible. But yeah, that's the first day for the split screen experience, which the game will be called The Right Gift, because you got to find the right gift that the player is hidden in. So yeah, that was the first day of my game jam for Yogscast game jam. I'll see you next time.